One of the great things about science is that when scientists make a discovery, it's not always in a prescribed manner, as in only in laboratory under strict settings with white lab coats and all the sorts of neat science gizmos that goes beep. In reality, the events and people involved in some of the major scientific discoveries are as weird and varied as they get. My case in point, drumroll please. The history timeline of cell theory. On 13th day of July 2019, Miss Joni, our biology teacher, tasked us to make a history timeline of the cell theory. Now she told us that there are 3 parts of the cell theory. Number 1, all organisms are composed of 1 or more cells. Number 2, the cell is the basic unit of life. And number 3, all cells come from pre-existing cells. It all started in early 1600s in the Netherlands, where a spectacle maker named Zacharias Janssen together with his father are said to have come up the first compound microscope, along with the first telescope. The microscope soon became a hot item, making it much like the iPod of its day. One such person was a fellow Dutchman by the name of Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who heard about this microscope, and instead of going out and buying one, he decided to make his own. And it was a strange little contraption indeed, as it looked more like a tiny puddle the size of a sunglass lens, that if he had stuck 2 together, it probably would have made a set of sunglasses. Anyway, once Leeuwenhoek had his microscope ready, he went town to town looking at anything and everything he could with them, including the gunk in his teeth. Yes, you heard it right. He actually discovered bacteria by looking at dental scrapings, which, when you keep in mind that people didn't brush their teeth much if at all back then, he must have a lovely bunch of bacteria to look at. When he wrote about his discovery, he didn't call them bacteria as we know them today, but he called them animalcules because they look like little animals to him. Then he sends his letter to a scientific colleague in England by the name of Robert Hooke. Hooke was a guy who really loved all aspects of science, so he dabbled in a little bit of everything, including physics, chemistry, and biology. Thus, it is Hooke who we can thank for the term the cell, as he was looking at a piece of cork under his microscope, and the little chambers he saw reminded him of cells or the rooms monks slept in their monasteries. Think college dorm rooms but without the TVs, computers, and a really annoying roommate. But he also made the mistake of locking horns with one of the most famous scientists ever, Sir Isaac Newton. Remember when I said Hooke dabbled in many different fields? Well, after Newton published a groundbreaking book on how planets move due to gravity, Hooke made a claim that Newton had been inspired by Hooke's work in physics. Newton, to say the least, did not like that, which sparked a tense relationship between the two that lasted even after Hooke died, as quite a bit of Hooke's research, as well as his only portrait, was misplaced due to Newton. Much of it was rediscovered thankfully after Newton's time, but not his portrait, as sadly, no one knows what Robert Hooke looked like. Fast forward to the 1800s, where 2 German scientists discovered something that today we might find rather obvious but helped tie together what we know as the cell theory. The first scientist was Matthias Schleiden, a botanist who came to realize that all planets are made up of cells, and at the same time on the other end of Germany was Theodor Swan, a scientist studied slides of animals who also came to the conclusion that all animals are made up of cells. Immediately, he reached out to the other scientists working in the same field with Schleiden, who got back to him, and the two started working on the beginning of the cell theory. A bone of contention arose between them as for the last part of the cell theory, that cells came from pre-existing cells. Schleiden didn't exactly subscribe to that thought, as he swore cells came from free cell formation, were just kind of spontaneously crystallized into existence. That's when another scientist named Rudolf Virchow stepped in with the research showing that cells did came from other cells. The cell theory came to be an important part of biology today. Some things we may know about science today may seem boring, but how we came to know them is incredibly fascinating. So if something bores you, dig deeper. It's probably got a real weird story behind it somewhere.